Good morning. Welcome back to Daybreak on Citizen TV, the show that brings what you need to think about as we begin the day. My name is Sam Gitugo. Just before I get into the panel, a few minutes ago, I focused on a story of that boy who is running, a 7-year-old who is running at 13 seconds. I said 13 minutes. It should be 13 seconds, not 13 minutes. It's 100 meters. I don't know how fast my panelist can run. And my panelist, Mheshimiwa Samatandi, karibu sana. Welcome back to Daybreak.
Thank you.
It's your first time this year.
Yes, thank you, Sam.
Have you been running?
Yeah. I'm a sportsman. I'm a footballer. I'm an athlete. This year, I'm going to spearhead goals within the Bunge FC. I invite you to watch.
You're going to spearhead goals?
Yes.
You're going to score goals, eh?
I'm going to ensure that we score many. I'm going to spearhead victories.
Very interesting. Right, Mheshimiwa Kipruto Kirwa, Deputy Party Leader of ANC. Yes. Karibu sana, former waziri.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Are you running anymore?
Well, I used to run when I was in high school.
Yeah. In high school. And David Osiany, an analyst in public affairs. Karibu sana.
You know, I play karate, and part of what you do is to run. It's a routine, and I can almost guarantee you I got speed more than some here at
Samatandi.
Yeah,
okay.
This wonderful body of mine with too many muscles covered in, you know, I cherish my muscles, so they need to be layered well.
Really?
So athletics is good. I mean, sports is good, but that boy is just fantastic. 13 seconds at that age?
Yes.
That boy is going to be great.
He'll do so well in a few years.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it and look at what's making headlines in the papers. On the front page of the Daily Nation, Raila hints at vote to change law this year. And like I said earlier, in apparent answer to Deputy President William Ruto, who has said the country is not ready for a referendum, the opposition leader says time has come to change the structure of government, and those still undecided will be left high and dry. We're looking at that story on page 6 of the Daily Nation. Still on the same page, it is death for OCS from hell. That's according to the Daily Nation. This is Nahashan, who is a former OCS officer commanding station, Ruaraka, who was found guilty and sentenced to death yesterday. Then, Baby Pendo, commanders to face trial. Senior police officers jailed for failed to rein in their juniors who beat toddler to death during raid to quell political violence in Kisumu in 2017. We'll be looking at that later on. Then on the front page of the Standard, the same story, Baby Pendo death, officers to face trial, and the judicial inquiry has found the 5 senior officers who commanded police deployed to crush a protest culpable for the brutal death and want the DPP to take the necessary action. Story on page 4. Then, detectives raid Balala's homes, warn corruption. EACC has summoned Tourism Cabinet Secretary to Integrity Center on Monday to record a statement on alleged irregular award of 100 million shilling contract for a major conference in Nairobi. We'll be looking at that later on. So, again, still on the front page of the Standard, this is the year of change, says Raila. Former Prime Minister tells critics the train of constitutional change has left the station and will not be stopped by any force. So, we have had a lot of conversation about why we need a referendum, why we don't. There are certain people who feel that we actually need to expand the executive, some feel we don't. And now the former Prime Minister says that this is the year for that change. We still don't have a referendum question. We still don't have a framework to look into what those areas are, apart from the divisive Building Bridges initiative. Where do we start?
Well, it's unfortunate that when we think of referendum, we think of individuals, and therefore Kenyans have made it almost referendum to be synonymous with Raila on one side and the deputy president on the other. For me, I strongly believe the constitution that we have today, compared to the constitution that we operated with for many years, we need to do an audit, because I see it as a product of an amalgam of thoughts from Westminster and also from the American system. And therefore, it is like a constitution in the high seas. We need to own it as Kenyans. We need to make it relevant to the aspirations of our people. And we need also to make it practical in terms of both the opposition and the government or in power. Such that it is easy for people who have captured a certain number of votes to be given a chance to be felt that they are part of the public leadership. Now, without going for details, I think my plea to Kenyans is that let this make the referendum question a question that is a product of consensus, so that we do not allow our country to be divisible, to be divided between those who are for and those who are against the constitution. Those who are in government today are likely to be in the opposition tomorrow, and vice versa. And therefore, at times when you are measuring the clothes for those in the opposition, also make sure that you have some extra material should you be in the opposition to adjust the cloth to fit your own size.
Right. So we see that the opposition leader yesterday hinted that a referendum to amend the constitution be held this year, and he told politicians still undecided on the need for constitutional change to declare their stand. I mean, why would you declare a stand on something that is not yet substantive?
No, I mean, because at this stages of preparation, it is known what is out there. I mean, two teams have spoken about it. So no one, it's about declaring a stand about or on something that's coming. I think Kenyans need to first look at the structure of our society. The structure of our society puts a lot of weight on ethnicity. Because of that weight put on ethnicity, usually during election time, it becomes a basis for conflict. Conflict because our ethnocentric society has decided to vest in people the hope and aspirations of the citizens. So you will find the people in Trans Nzoia vested it in Honorable Kipruto Kirwa, and the people in Murang'a have vested it on Sam Gituku, and the people in South Nyanza have vested it on David Osiany, and those in Central Nyanza have vested it on Sam Atandi. Because of this reality and what it portends for the country, the best thing then to do is to seek a solution, a permanent solution that puts into consideration the realities of our country. Now, beyond just fixing the problem of tribe and affording every ethnic group an opportunity on the table to distribute resources, we also have to agree that if we were to change the constitution, then we must also seek for a more accountable constitution, which is what would bring me to the propositions that have been made. I know that what has driven some of this proposition, for example, a parliamentary system, for which I have been a proponent all these years, what becomes the drive right now is the aforementioned. But inside that, we then need to see, does this proposal afford the country a more accountable leadership? Is it the solution to having a prime minister who will come to parliament and be accountable to members of parliament who represent the constituents? Because as it is right now, who would you hold into account? Cabinet secretaries don't come to parliament unless they're summoned by the parliamentary committees, unlike when they used to do in the days of Honorable Kipruto and the rest, when you would be parliamentarians, but again, you are put to task in every parliament session, and it gives people a hint into what's going on. So I do not want us to consider this constitutional change or referendum as a tug of war between two parties ahead of 2022 elections. Rather, we need to ask ourselves, is this what is good for our country at this point in time? And I bet it is.
And the DP is quoted as appearing to suggest that a referendum, a boundary review, and a general election in the space of 5 years are not economically feasible. He has his own reasons why he feels that it's not the right time for a referendum, including that he doesn't feel persuaded that you want to expand the executive to include the positions of the Prime Minister and the deputies, yet those positions will be taken by the winning party. Why do you sit in all this argument?
First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga for closing this debate on the referendum issue. Because he's closed it, because there's been this issue that, are we going for a referendum or do we need it or not? I think his statement yesterday closes the debate. Now we are moving to the next stage of now.
What do you mean closes the debate?
Because there are two people talking about, one opposed to the referendum, one supporting the referendum. And I think, let me just tell Kenyans that on the question of constitutional reforms, the person to listen to is Raila Odinga, not William Ruto, because this is historical. Where has the new constitution come from? The process for the
Yet the deputy president has the right to opinion.
He has been on the side opposing the constitutional reforms.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. That he has his own right to have an opinion, and he has his own followers. That
is true, but you see, we are talking about doing the right thing for the country, not merely opposing. So what my point is that the debate is closed. So as Kenyans, let us look at what are we going to change? What should we amend? You know, but the question that there will be a referendum is closed. Now it's going to be there.
When is the referendum?
Which is very clear. Now let us now look at the issues that we need to push. And as young parliamentarians, our issue has been national inclusivity. And I see when we talk about national inclusivity, some people think that the positions will be created for others. The other issue is the question that, according to his presentation at the Chatham House, that we need to have a strong opposition. We don't have
who now? The deputy president?
The deputy president.
Former Prime Minister.
We don't have a problem with the opposition. The issue is power in the executive and how the executive authority is being dispensed, how it is managed. Is the president accountable to Kenyans directly? He is not, because there's nowhere where the president accounts to Kenyans. He doesn't come to parliament to answer questions on his administration. It therefore means that even though we have a new constitution, the president is still very, very powerful. So one of the things that we must achieve in this referendum is to devolve the power of the president so that it can be shared between the presidency and parliament through the creation of the position of the prime minister. This is my understanding. The other issue, which also we must address, is we have an executive which is ethnic or tribal in nature. This is because of the way we do our elections, where once you win an election, and you can win an election using two communities, as we have seen. Two tribes can win an election, and they go on to appoint their tribesmen or tribesmen.
Are you saying that in government you have only two communities?
Basically, and this has been proven. If you look at the composition of the public service, largely you find that it is controlled by two major ethnic communities. These are facts, and this is because of the kind of constitution we have, where the president and the deputy president, they wield massive powers in appointment and in distribution of resources. So these are some of the conventions we want to have, and it has nothing to do with opposition. Opposition is not the problem. You know, the problem is Kenyans are paying taxes. Kenyans are contributing to the national cake, but is it being distributed fairly or equally? And I think this is something that we cannot run away from. We must fix it. And I agree with His Excellency Raila Odinga that this is the time the train has left. So and if you are not boarding the train, you will be left behind.
So when you say that you want national inclusivity and that has to be enforced through a review of the constitution, what exactly do you mean?
What I mean is that we need to have an executive structure that lives up to that will bring on board larger section of Kenyans.
Just be specific. What exactly do you want to see at the executive?
I want to see an expanded executive where we create more positions within the executive, not to people, to individuals, but those positions be occupied by Kenyans representing diverse interest groups.
So what positions are those?
Well, okay, I support the Bomas draft. Personally, I support the Bomas draft as the reference document for this referendum. Okay. Where of course the Bomas draft has the creation of the position of the Prime Minister, who will be leader of government, business in parliament, who will actually leader of government, and then also we are going to have the head of state. The president who is going to be the head of state. So the Prime Minister will be answerable to Kenyans in parliament. He will be leader of government, a member of parliament, And of course, we want to have ministers being members of parliament.
Okay.
I am opposed to this, the current system where ministers are appointed from technocrats. Some of them are not visible. They don't know. They don't know what is happening in the country. They cannot articulate government agenda to the public. That is the reason why you find today the government goes out of the way to show Kenyans what they are doing. Okay. If we had responsible cabinet secretaries who are politicians, this would not happen. So we want, I believe that in the next dispensation, members of parliament must be the ones running ministries.
You're a former minister, and while that time you are a minister, you're also an MP. Do you think that a minister being an MP makes them deliver better than the cabinet secretaries we now have that are not exactly actively involved in politics?
Well, apart from delivery, I will go back to what David said earlier, that our politics in Africa, not Kenya alone, is still ethnic. And therefore that ethnic diversity is reflected when an individual like Sam Atandi is elected, the MP for Alego Usonga, and in his wisdom, the president does appoint him as a minister. The people of Alego Usonga and the neighboring counties will see one of their own being reflected in the presence in the government. That will assist that kind of inclusivity. At the same time, being a politician is likely to understand the heartbeat of the nation right from the ground. Number three, my own variation would be, because elections in Kenya are still divisive and it's still winner take it all, whether you amend the constitution or not.
Right.
We need to have some kind of diversity such that 2/3 of the cabinet can come from parliament and 1/3 can come from the rest, so that people who may have certain special skills are included in the cabinet. And when they're included in the cabinet, they automatically become ex officio members of parliament. Why do I say so? So that you allow that interaction between members of parliament and the cabinet secretaries or the ministers of the day. The way the Attorney General was in the past, that he is ex officio member of parliament, and therefore he has a chance to interact with MPs, to answer questions in parliament, and express themselves. Now, I may have been so general at the beginning. The system that we inherited at independence was Westminster system, where members of parliament are ministers. Now, because of our greed for power, we amalgamated the two positions, that of the Queen and that of the Prime Minister, so that the President is head of government and head of state. Now, what I'm thinking, for purposes of dispersing power from one powerful presidency, we need to have a Prime Minister, so that part of the power goes to the Prime Minister and some of the power remains with head of state. So that we have head of state and we have head of government as two separate individuals, but working together in complementarity.
Okay. So he's very passionate about the position of Prime Minister, Deputy Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister will be the lead of government business in a parliament. I don't know how that changes, because currently we have a majority leader in the name of Arendwale, for instance. We have the opposition party led by the minority leader. If it's at the National Assembly, it's by John Mbadi. But how does that make it better for the delivery and the delivery of services of the government to the people, when now the leader of government business is a Prime Minister sitting in cabinet?
Now, let's look at the current role of Fred Matiang'i. In effect, really, if you look at his current role, he is more or less the leader of government business. More or less. I don't want to make it, abundantly, I don't want to seem as though that's the truth. But the thing is that the role that Fred Matiang'i has been given to coordinate implementation of government projects and communication of the same puts him at such a pivotal point in terms of decision making. Today, he can summon the Minister for Agriculture and ask, where are the fertilizers? Why didn't they arrive in good time? Since he is the one who has that answer, imagine if he were able to go to Parliament and be cross-examined and be asked, this is the problem with NTSA, why has it not been fixed? This is a problem with the Ministry of Agriculture. Farmers are crying that fertilizers have arrived late. Why has it not been fixed? Why are the cameras not working in Nairobi? We have murders going on every day, and no one seems to be accountable. Imagine if you had someone like that being able to be asked questions in Parliament. Now, that's what having a Prime Minister who's accountable to Parliament is about. Whether or not he will be a member of Parliament, as Atandi says, I don't know. Okay. Because that's going to be another debate. Because I have seen the proposition by Moses Kuria, you know, a member of Parliament, Prime Minister has to be a member of Parliament, and that would be great. Whether that would be agreeable, I don't know. What I know is that the problem is not even the power that the president wields, rather how that power is used. And that's why we need to carry with us the spirit of the Constitution, more than the letter itself. The spirit of the Constitution. If we do not do that, Sam, then I can almost guarantee you that tomorrow we will appoint a minister for internal security or interior who comes from Luo Nyanza, and the next thing you will see is everyone in that ministry will be from Luo Nyanza, devoid of even qualification sometimes. Then you will have a Luya appointed minister for energy, and everyone in the ministry will be from Luya land, and that would be tragic, because that's not what we are trying to do. To try and get people to the table of, you know, national cake distribution does not mean that we in our own selves then now demand of our newly elected, or say, oh, Waziri Kipruto Kirwa, now you have been given energy. This is the redemption of the Luya and Kalenjin nation. Hapa kwako ndio sisi tutasaidika. That will not be our way out. But we also need to look at the governments and the various countries that are almost corruption free. Right. Most of them have a parliamentary system. Go to Germany, parliamentary system. Go to Italy, parliamentary system. United Kingdom, parliamentary system. Even India, the reason it has grown massively is because of the availability in law to hold leaders, especially at the government level, to account. Parliamentary system. So what makes it so hard for our parliament to hold the government to account? Currently? How do they hold government to account? Every now and then you'll see cabinet secretaries, like even this week Mwangi Kiunjuri was before parliament. They are questioned by parliament, they write reports and file them with their you reckon some that they are only in front of a parliamentary committee when they have been invited for questioning or investigation, which is not the way it ought to be. The way it ought to be is that the leader of government ought to report to parliament progress on different things, and which then gives opportunity for people to ask different questions. Remember that when you sit in the parliamentary committees, sometimes the interests there are diverse. I saw the sugar report literally trampled, and a member of parliament accused of distributing 10,000 shillings to committee members in agriculture committee so that they bring down that report. So how would that stop, even if you have ministers sitting in parliament? And I'd actually argue that it will get even worse because they have the opportunity to collude with their colleague members of parliament. Because I don't think you are able to silence everyone. You know, there are people who may want to ask questions in the agriculture committee. They don't sit in the agriculture committee. But because they're parliamentarians, when that opportunity comes in parliament, they are unbarred and they will get to the bottom of it, I suppose. You want to say something? I think for me, why I believe we need to have cabinet secretaries being members of parliament is the first reason is that if you look at the system that we have now, the priority in government is, there's no priority in the way government implements development projects, because cabinet secretaries do not understand the people's priorities. And what we have where cabinet secretaries come to parliament to appear before committees, that system is not effective, because they will come to the committee to answer specific questions that we members have. And right now we have a question time where we raise questions in parliament, and they're supposed to be answered by cabinet secretaries in the committees where the questions are relevant. Again, that system, the cabinet secretaries come to ask us those specific questions. We would have loved a situation where questions are answered on the floor of the House.
which is not happening. And to be honest, accountability, Parliament is unable to hold ministers to account. That is the reality of the matter. They are unable. And ministers come to Parliament, they appear in Parliament, some of them are disjointed. They don't have facts.
What do you mean disjointed?
They are disjointed. When they come, they really cannot give you, you know. So what we are saying in short is that, and this is the experience we have had, is that members of the executive, the CS and the PSS, even are in conflict, because some of them have talked to us saying that, you know, the CS is my boss, but we went through the same process of appointment. We were appointed by the head of state. We went through vetting in Parliament, but now he holds a bigger stick than me. Yet, you know, they feel that the process of appointing is the same.
So isn't that a problem of personality rather than
it's not personality? It's not. It's the problem of the system, because how do you go through the same process that
it's not the same
PS
process.
went through? And yet, this is supposed to be your boss.
Samatandi, you sit at the National Assembly and you know very well that when a cabinet secretary is nominated by the president, they are vetted by the committee on appointments that is chaired by the Speaker of the National Assembly. For PSs, they are vetted by the committees, the departmental committees. How do you say that's the same process?
Bottom line is that the process is more of the same. The Speaker does not make the fact that the Speaker is chairing does not make the vetting process different from the one done by the committees. The Speaker does not make it more special. The fact is that they are being vetted by Parliament, and these are members of Parliament vetting.
What do you think about this, Wakiro?
Well, I think the vetting process is a matter of detail. For me, fundamentally, what we need to do is to create a distinction between the CS and the PS in terms of one coming from a unique constituency that has a certain amount of leverage through the people's mandate. To me, that would make a lot of sense. A PS basically is the accounting officer in our old system, where he supervises. But under the old constitution, the PS used to supervise under the direction of the minister, and the constitution was very clear that he supervises under the general direction of the minister, and the minister is in charge of policy and is a spokesman of the ministry on behalf of the president, because from the direct mandate the president gets from the people, he donates part of it to you as a minister. And therefore you have double leverage. Leverage from the presidency out of the executive mandate, and the leverage from the people who elected you. And when we were ministers, we felt we were ministers. And when you move, even the air around you moves. But nowadays, the CSS, you know, that's the truth.
But you didn't know, because you felt it. You're not a CS today. You don't feel it.
Well, we don't feel them. We were felt.
Something that happened, which you want to laugh about. Huh?
Yes.
We were sitting in a particular committee with some cabinet secretaries, and they brought us development projects which have been achieved, which the ministry has achieved. And when we look at those projects, they don't exist on the ground.
Well, you can imagine.
Because and the minister is not aware. You know, these are some of the gaps that we need to adjust. Because you have a cabinet secretary who sits in Nairobi who knows nothing on the ground, and these officers are misleading him.
Questions.
This would not happen if we had a CS who is a politician, who is a member, who is elected leader.
On the face of it, as we speak right now, no single law bars a cabinet secretary from going to review projects. Nothing stops them from knowing whether a certain project exists or not. Are you saying that the only difference that makes people brilliant to understand things are happening on the ground is just being a politician?
Not a politician, being accountable, having been elected. You sought for a political seat through public engagement. The process of winning an election is public participation. So you understand what is going on
Please,
the ground.
as you respond to this, I believe the wisdom when this constitution was being written was to separate powers, to separate roles, so that the executive can run the government and parliament can oversight and legislate, and the judiciary can interpret the law. Why do you want to go back on that? Yet there must have been some good reasons that led to where we are now.
Some, you know, the sages said only a fool does not change his mind.
That is
the reason we have to
insufficient.
audit this constitution is that for almost 10 years we have had it in place. We have to look at aspects that we changed hoping they would be better and whether or not they have been better. I do not want to, I don't want to make it look like having technocrats only as CSs is a failure in itself. Rather, you must be able to get technocrats with a political antenna, not necessarily elected. All right? Because that would be to mean that during the times when ministers were parliamentarians and vice versa, that all of them performed, and that's wrong. Not all of them performed as well as, you know, my brother Kipruto Kirwa did a stellar job in the Ministry of Agriculture, but not all his colleagues are memorable in that manner. In fact, if you ask who are the people they served with during that time, some of them would not be remembered. And that's why I called on us to go back to the spirit of the Constitution. Yes, we have had technocrats. But you see, again, the problem is we ended up with technocrats without a political antenna. So then there are people who somewhat came from the corporate world who are used to closing themselves in, who are used to reporting to work and is called boss, who was the CEO of a multinational. And then you bring him into a world where people want to walk into his office, and he was not used to that. Only the PA would walk into his office, and people would only walk in when he summons them. Now you bring them into the political, this political world, and you do not train them enough to know that this is varied, or I mean it's a departure from the norm. That MPs will come, some with weird demands, some with real demands, and you have to listen and find a balance and let them go back saying they have found some level of understanding. So we then need to, that's why we need to have this referendum and a proper audit before we go into the referendum. What have been the pros and the cons of this constitution? Is it possible to end up with parliamentarians who are also ministers? What are the advantages of that? What are the disadvantages of that? Because I think that what this constitution envisaged was to delink the ministerial or cabinet secretary roles from the day-to-day politics so that they could concentrate and give themselves to the service as cabinet secretaries, rather than being dragged at home every weekend with the demands as politicians are, rather than having queues of constituents in the office. The question was, how will they deliver on their mandate? But as we have gone along, we have realized that there is a disconnect. So then how do we meet this? How do we work on this disconnect? Is it entirely to have ministers as parliamentarians? I do not think so, actually. I think you need a hybrid, as Mheshimiwa Kirwa had said, but a hybrid of both technocrats and ministers and politicians. That's the only way.
I want to give you a list of CSs who are politicians. Najib Balala, Mwangi Kiunjuri, Rashid Echesa, Eugene Omalwa, Charles Keter. Are they performing better because they are politicians?
I think so, yes. Let me rate them. I think they're doing very well. The level at which they engage Kenyans on the things they're doing is different from the others. But you asked what the problem we are seeing with this new setup where ministers are members of technocrats. Personally, I'm one of the people who supported this system initially at Bomas. I supported the professionalizing the cabinet. But one of the things that I've seen, which is unfortunate, is that these ministers have actually ethnicized cabinet. There are some ministries, you find that if you look at boards of parastatals in a certain ministry, it's 80% from the ethnic community of that cabinet secretary. So that again...
Was this apparent during the previous regime?
No, this was not. In fact, we were coming off the Nusumukate government, which you know was one of the best governments we have had in this country. If you look at the performance of government, the way that particular government united the country and the deliverables that they brought forth for Kenyans. So when we joined this system, then now we get ministers who are technocrats, and they have actually ethnicized. They are not even professional anymore. So I think, and there's nowhere you can meet them to question them. Where would you meet Some of these ministers.
You don't know them?
Some of this, this one of ICT, where do you meet him to question him about the manner in which he's running his ministry?
But you approach him...
As an example. So what we are saying is that, you see a member of parliament, we will meet him and we'll tell him off. If he was a member of parliament, you are in your ministry. So I think this is an area where they have really failed, and we cannot allow this to continue.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So I want to leave that debate at that point.
No, it is suffice to note, that Matiang'i is not a politician. And he has done well in terms of even engagement. That's what I mean by getting people who may not necessarily be politicians, but are politically attuned. So that we end up with someone who understands the system. Let's not balkanize and everyone but chopper them.
But what is the definition of a politician? Like Chester, why is he called a politician? What has he done to merit that position?
It's not.
Is just by running for an office, does it make you a politician? No, are we also saying politicians are not professionals?
That's it.
Yeah, so these are some of the issues the questions. And I would buy his argument that, yes, every person serving in public must have a political antenna, because this very system, who rules administration, is a product of a political process. And therefore, we must engage politically whatever you are doing to address the wishes and the aspirations of the people.
Then that would mean that the appointing authority has to be aware of that when they are picking their CSs.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Have to change the law.
I agree with you, but you see the clamor, and this came from civil society, was to say every politician has not gone to school, every politician is corrupt, every politician is inefficient. And this is where we go wrong. Individuals should be measured on their own performance.
Even the very fact that the likes of a Chester cabinet secretary should tell you that there's a mistake with this system.
I don't know him very well.
When you can get some people like those ones to be ministers.
So what is the problem with him? He's not here.
He's semi-literate.
No, you cannot say that. He's not here. I'm not allowed to go down that lane.
I don't know him.
We cannot attack his character until that time that he comes on set. Will you find him for us?
You can get him. I'm sure you can get him. I'm sure you can get him. But I think the point is that there's obviously many things which have gone wrong with this system. And Kenyans need to understand that this is a time we have to change it. As proposed and finalized by His Excellency Raila Amolo Odinga yesterday.